Hello, today we're going to analyze a poem using the Smile Poetry Method. So the Smile Poetry Method, S-M-I-L-E, is made up of structure, meaning, imagery, literary devices, and effect. And the first thing you do is structure, and we're going to use a poem today that's called Eating Poetry by Mark Strand, right here. And I'm going to go ahead and fold this back so it doesn't take as much space. All right. So this is our poem, and we're going to use this method to analyze it. So the first thing we look at is the structure of the poem. And for the structure, you usually don't even need to read the poem. You can really just look at it, kind of glance at it. And what we're looking for is how the poem is built. So literally like the architecture of the poem. We can see just by looking at it that it is made up of stanzas, and a stanza is like a paragraph in poetry, and each stanza has 3 lines. Okay, how many stanzas? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 3-line stanzas. All right. What else can we see that's structural? Whether a poem rhymes, has a rhyme scheme or not, is kind of a structural thing. We can see here, just kind of going through, it doesn't appear to rhyme. Now there is 1 or 2 rhymes, but it's not an actual rhyme scheme. They look like they're more accidental. Or maybe not accidental. These two definitely, bark and dark. So a little bit of rhyming, not a whole lot. And the other thing you might mention for structure is the genre of poem or style of poem. So if it's, for instance, like a sonnet is a 14-line poem. They're very specific structure and format. That would be a structural thing. If it's a picture poem, maybe you have a poem that the words shape mean something. For instance, maybe the words look like a tree, and the poem is about a tree. That would be a picture poem, so that's definitely structure. But here for this one, I would just say it is a 3-line per stanza, 6-stanza poem with very little rhyme. That would do for structure. Okay. Next thing, if you read a poem and right away you know the meaning, good to go. You can write down the meaning. Usually that doesn't happen. So typically when I analyze a poem, I get to meaning, I give it a shot, and then I just keep moving. I usually have to go back to meaning at the end to really figure out the meaning. Every poem is a little bit of a puzzle. Every poem is using language in a creative way that's condensed. To get all the information that's being conveyed in a poem, if you were to write it all out like in a story form, it would be pages and pages. They're really shrinking and condensing down what it is they're trying to say, and that's how they have so much emotional resonance. That's how poems have so much impact. So because they're packed tight with language that has dual purposes and metaphor and all these clever ways of putting more information into fewer words, you can always unpack them, which means every poem is essentially a puzzle. You get to unpack it, unpack the meaning, figure out what's actually being said. So think of them as puzzles. It makes it a lot more interesting. So I'm going to read the poem now, because to get into meaning or any of the other stuff, you have to have read it. So let's go ahead and read. So, Eating Poetry by Mark Strand. Ink runs from the corners of my mouth. There is no happiness like mine. I have been eating poetry. The librarian does not believe what she sees. Her eyes are sad, and she walks with her hands in her dress. The poems are gone. The light is dim. The dogs are on the basement stairs and coming up. Their eyeballs roll. Their blonde legs burn like brush. The poor librarian begins to stamp her feet and weep. She does not understand. When I get on my knees and lick her hand, she screams. I am a new man. I snarl at her and bark. I romp with joy in the bookish dark. Okay, so let's say I've read this and I don't quite get the meaning. So I'm going to keep on going. We'll get back to the meaning afterwards. So now for imagery, imagery is one that we can always do. How are the five senses evoked or stimulated by the poem? So think of all five senses, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can feel, what you can taste, what you can touch. How does the reader see, hear, etc.? What is vivid and clear? So some of the things that stood out to me for imagery is right here, ink runs from the corners of my mouth. That's something that I could really picture right in the beginning of the poem. So I'm just going to put an I and circle it for imagery. I have been eating poetry. Another one I got that stood out here, it says, the light is dim, the dogs are on the basement stairs and coming up. So I'm picturing these dogs running up the stairs. And then it continues on talking about the dogs. It said, their eyeballs roll, their blonde legs burn like brush. The poor librarian begins to stamp her feet and weep. So this is kind of frightening. You have these dogs running up from the basement. They're described in a way that's very scary, very, at least aggressive. Their blonde legs burn like brush. Are they on fire? Like, what is going on here? She does not understand. When I get on my knees and lick her hand, she screams. Okay, I can picture that. And as I'm picturing that, I'm still thinking about the dogs. And I realize he's doing something that a dog would do. So is the speaker in the poem one of the dogs? That would make sense. That's why she's panicking, she's freaking out, she's screaming. She's just a poor librarian trying to keep everything calm and cool in her library. And these dogs are running around going crazy. And then this here, so this here I'll mark for imagery. The lick her hand part, she screams. I am a new man. I snarl at her and bark. I romp with joy in the bookish dark. Okay, so this is also good imagery. I snarl at her and bark. I romp with joy in the bookish dark. And the word romp, if you're not familiar with it, no one uses it anymore, so don't feel bad. But if you look it up, it pretty much means to dance around or move around playfully. And I think in the Oxford English Dictionary, it uses the word boisterously. I don't know if that helps define it or not, but it's romping around. Another word is like cavort, means the same thing. It's just like playfully jumping around. So just picture these dogs jumping around in this library. This woman is freaking out. She's a librarian. She doesn't know what's happening. And that's all really strong imagery. And it seems to accelerate as the poem goes on. It starts out pretty, relatively normal. He's eating poetry. That's kind of weird. But the action seems to pick up more and more and more. More crazy things happen toward the end of the poem. So things in this poem are ramping up as the poem goes. So let's take a look now for literary devices. That's our next little category. Identify common literary rhetorical devices such as metaphor, personification, simile, hyperbole, irony, shift, contrast, etc. Let me grab something. And I just had you go through, and if you haven't done this, it's on my agenda slide for yesterday, or for Monday. I had you go through, and this is a slide presentation that's linked to my agenda slide for Monday. And I had you take notes on everything that's highlighted in yellow. So rhyme scheme, pattern of rhyme, usually in rhyme, but not always. There's some examples. I want you to read through all the examples, but you don't have to write anything that's not in yellow highlight. Alliteration. So it's going to start giving you these techniques. So I wanted you to take your notes from that presentation and see which techniques you could identify from the ones that we covered in that presentation. So looking out here, ink runs from the corners of my mouth. That's really good imagery. I don't know if that's a metaphor or if it's really happening yet. It's kind of hard to tell in the first word of a poem or first line of a poem. So I'm going to keep going. There is no happiness like mine. Okay, no, I don't notice anything technique-wise. I have been eating poetry. Okay, Again, is this metaphoric? So I might put like metaphor with a question mark. Or is somebody really eating poetry? The librarian does not believe what she sees. Her eyes are sad, and she walks with her hands in her dress. Okay, this is imagery that creates, so I'm going to put imagery that equals sadness. Okay, so she's sad. Next line, the poems are gone. The light is dim. This continues the sadness. The dogs are on the basement stairs and coming up. This builds like anticipation, like something's going to happen, like something bubbling up, like pressure bubbling up. This part just kind of extends the sadness. The dogs are on the basement stairs and coming up. Their eyeballs roll, their blonde legs burn like brush. What is this one called where we have B, all these B sounds, and L's too, because it says their blonde legs burn like brush. So we have the B's and the L's repeating. There's an L, there's an L. That is alliteration, which is the first one in our presentation. Okay, so alliteration. And what does it do? Anytime you find a technique, try to ask yourself, what does it do? What is the effect of it? Their blonde legs burn like brush. It makes the sentence go fast because of the repetition. It's like real bouncy and fast, which is kind of describing what they're doing, right? Their legs are on fire. They're running so fast. Their blonde legs burn like brush. So I'm going to say it speeds things up. Okay, she does not understand. Again, talking about our librarian. Oh, I'm sorry, the poor librarian begins to stamp her feet and weep. Again, the sadness. She does not understand. When I get on my knees and lick her hand, she screams. So she's scared, okay? But he's not trying to scare her. I think that's why he says she does not understand. He's just happy. He's excited. He thinks he's playing. He's having fun. But she is panicking. So this one, I might say librarian is panicking because she doesn't understand the dog's, I guess, joy. They're actually happy. Remember he says up here, there's no happiness like mine. And then down here, I am a new man, I snarl at her and bark. I romp with joy in the bookish dark. So we know that he's happy and she's freaked out. Okay? So I snarl at her and bark. That's something that a dog would definitely do. So imagery equals dog imagery. And the fact that right here he says, I am a new man, and the very next line, I snarl at her and bark, that's not acting like a man at all. That's the opposite. It's acting like a dog. So I would say that's irony. Something unexpected. You wouldn't expect a man to act that way. I romp with joy in the bookish dark. And here we have sort of a contrast, which has its own irony. You don't usually expect in a dark, bookish library there to be all this joy. And romping is like playfully jumping around in a library, a dark library. So the contrast, it's got irony. Okay, so now we've done all of this for literary devices. We found quite a few. What is the effect? Explain what the poet is conveying to you and how the message influenced you. How does it make the reader feel? So, the same when you get into meaning, like, what is the poem talking about? Let's just write the topic down. The poem is about blank. What is the poem about? It's about poetry. That's the main topic. And we ask, what is the poem trying to say about poetry? And the first place we can start, we can ask ourselves, is it positive or is it negative? And it's kind of mixed because it's kind of wild and crazy and almost destructive. It's scaring this poor librarian the way they're behaving. But we have to remember that there is no happiness like the speaker's. He romps with joy in the bookish dark. Because he's eating poetry, he's super happy. So he loves poetry. And the speaker isn't necessarily the author. So it might not, it could be she loves poetry. We don't know if it's a male or a female. Oh, actually, he says, I am a new man. So never mind. In this case, we can say the speaker loves poetry. He loves poetry. Um, but the other half of that, others, talking about the librarian, don't understand his passion. And when I read this and I begin to realize that this poem is probably about a guy who walks into a library and is reading a poem. And a library is a place where you're supposed to be studying. It's supposed to be super quiet. What if this guy is loud? What if he's laughing out loud? What if he gets excited at something he reads and he slaps the table? Um, or he just wants to share it with somebody nearby, like what he's reading and what he's excited about. And all these people in the library would be like, dude, be quiet. What are you doing? You're freaking out. They don't understand his passion. So maybe the whole thing about the dogs romping around, acting like animals, that's just a metaphor he uses to convey his passion for reading poetry, the way it makes him feel, like a dog that's happy and out of control. And because he has all that passion, other people don't know how to react. They think he's weird. They're afraid of him. They don't get him. So maybe the whole thing with the dogs is all just an extended metaphor. An extended because it doesn't just happen once, it kind of goes throughout the whole poem. This idea that this guy is like a wild animal. That would be an extended metaphor. All right. So now if I were to go through and fill this out, structure, I would say 6 stanza poem. And I'm going to say it's free verse, meaning it doesn't rhyme. 6 stanza, free verse, 3 lines per stanza. And there are a couple places where it rhymes. But for the most part, it's free verse. Okay, the meaning, I think he's trying to say that the speaker is very passionate about poetry, comma, and put like a wild animal. Others don't understand his passion. Okay, imagery, strong imagery of a frightened, sad, when you have 2 adjectives that describe something, one after another, you usually put a comma between them. A frightened, sad librarian. And there's a word that means to contrast something by showing it side by side. Strong imagery of a frightened, sad librarian is, and the word is juxtaposed. It just means to like hold up 2 things so people can see how they're different. And it applies in stories, and if 2 things are near each other in a story or visually side by side in a picture, it's being juxtaposed. The noun version would be juxtaposition. So strong imagery of a frightened, sad librarian is juxtaposed with a passionate lover of poetry who acts like a wild dog. Okay, literary devices. We have metaphor. Man, I'm going to put C and circle it. I'm using that for compares. Man compared to dog. Okay. We also have alliteration. Describing burning legs. Just show how fast and how much action has happened. Okay. There's some irony. In which what's ironic? A couple of things. One is the joy versus dark library. The way that he's acting in a library is ironic. It's unexpected. And then maybe another one would be how a librarian doesn't understand somebody's passion for poetry, because you would think a librarian would be all about books and poetry, but you can imagine over the years people lose their passion for things. So there's a little bit of irony in the fact that the librarian doesn't really understand. Okay, the effect. I think by writing it as a poem, the author attempts to convey the passion he feels when reading poetry, not actually eating it. The author attempts to convey the passion he feels when reading poetry for the reader as they read his poem. So a little bit meta. The author attempts to convey the passion he feels in reading poetry for the reader as they read his poem. So he's hoping you feel some of the passion and connection with his poem that he feels when he reads poetry. He's trying to create a love of poetry and make it infectious or contagious. That's my interpretation, my analysis. You can always, when you analyze something, there's no one right answer. The key is you have to be able to point at things and explain to people how you came to the conclusion you came to. Okay, that's it for this part for today. Let me zoom out so you can see it all. Not zooming. Very good.